longer. Those are just some of the highlights that the economic survey has put on the table. But joining me now is the author of the economic survey, the chief economic advisor, Anantha Nageswaran. Mr. Nageswaran, many thanks for joining us here on CNBC-TV18, and congratulations on authoring the survey. I'll get to your experience of putting the survey together at the very end. But let me start by talking to you about your growth projections. 7% for FY23, 6.5% for FY24, nominal growth of 11%. That is higher than what market economists are factoring in. Most seem to be closer to 6%, if not slightly lower, and nominal at about 10%. Now, I know you've projected your growth accelerants or your growth magnets as the reason behind why you believe that we should get to 6.5% next year, and you're even ambitious enough to project 7 to 8% over the rest of the decade. What are you most confident about, and what is the single biggest risk factor, global and domestic, that could be the downside risk?
Shireen, you had several questions packed into that. First of all, I did not predict 7 to 8% for the rest of the decade. I said if additional reforms are undertaken, even possible to go beyond 7%, but I was more talking about a range of 6.5 to 7 rather than 6 to 6.5%. If you look at the IMF forecast released this morning for 23-24, they talk about 6.1, but there are many other agencies which are within this ballpark of between 6 and 6.5. Given the uncertainties we face, I think a few basis points of difference. These are in the context of GDP estimation. These are all not big differences, and we also highlighted, while stating our base case of 6.5%, that the downside risk is higher than the upside to that baseline estimate. And when we talked of entrenched inflation and tightening cycle could prolong, that is something that we spoke in the global context.
Yes, that is something that you spoke of in the global context. But if I were to ask you about the risk factors domestically, what is it that you would be most concerned about? One of the aspects that you have talked about in the survey is the current account deficit. At this point in time, you believe that it's manageable, but you also talk about the need to monitor that closely. What would you be watchful of?
So, domestic context, I don't see too many risks to growth. I also mentioned in my presentation that much of the risks, or even almost all of the risks, come from the global uncertainties we face, both political and economic. And obviously, primarily it stems from uncertainties with respect to the evolution of commodity prices and also potential supply chain disruptions if the war in Europe intensifies or some other developments happen. So in that sense, given the fact that even high frequency indicators with respect to India in the third quarter are still doing quite all right, I would my best assessment is that the risks to our growth estimates stem predominantly from global factors.